Well, in today's edition of Weather to Watch, we start with breaking news. A National Weather Service office in North Dakota determined that they had an EF-5 tornado occur in that state back in June of this year. The National Weather Service office in North Dakota, this is the Grand Forks office, looked at the damage survey results for a storm that occurred on the 20th of June of this year, late in the evening, and the rating assessment was modified and moved up to an EF-5. That means they had estimated peak winds in that tornado of over 210 miles per hour. And at one point, that storm was max width just over a mile wide. It killed 3 people. A very, very terrifying event, and part of a storm pattern that was pretty prolific up there in North Dakota in June. Here's Bismarck right here. And it's amazing that all these tornadoes occurred. And look how many of them just kind of clustered within a short distance of I-94 up here. I think that's kind of interesting. But reoccurring storms day after day up there. I think it was a record-breaking month for North Dakota as well, and just in terms of numbers of tornadoes. And that EF-5 is the first one since Moore, Oklahoma, back in 2013. And it wasn't just up there. The entire country has gone nuts this year, basically. If you look at the trend line, which is this dark gray line right here, and you look at what the tornadoes were doing ever since that mid-March outbreak, it went up above the trend line and never looked back. It's been above that consistently now through the early part of October. Well, the one piece of good news here is that it is the opposite of tornado weather. In fact, there is barely a severe weather threat in the U.S. today, despite the fact that you do see a lot of clouds moving around. We got a couple upper-level systems. Visible satellite loop is great at picking these things out. You can even see the spin in the cloud right there. And this is a frontal boundary that's going here. Another front up here. We'll take a look at all that in a minute. We have easterly flow, very typical in Florida, and pretty bone dry out west. Some offshore low stratus clouds there in central and southern California. Again, pretty typical. The jet stream shows this sheared out trough. That's a trough of low pressure that kind of bends back like this. So the strongest winds are along here. But despite that, sometimes wind shear is a major contributor to severe weather, but you also have to have instability and the right setup, and that's just not there for this particular flow in the middle part of the troposphere. So as you might expect, though, and if you watch my channel long enough to know, out ahead of these troughs, it's usually warm, and back behind them, it's cool. So see if we can find some verification for that. We have one little weak weather system at the surface with that upper level spinning I was just showing you on the satellite. It's a cool front and a warm front, but very hard to discern. This is more of a stalled, kind of slow-moving front, but it is definitely cooler behind it with high pressure centered over Nebraska, South Dakota border there. And look at this, another cool front coming down from Canada that will definitely have an impact on weather as well, at least in the short term. And we also want to look at the radar loop. This was recorded, about 4 o'clock in the afternoon or so. Again, nothing severe. Might be a couple of cracks of thunder there in northwest portions of Missouri and out through Kansas. And the same can be said for these storms moving from Tennessee up into Kentucky. And this is the closest thing even resembling a squall line. Looks like there was an offshore warning with that cell right there in the Gulf, but that's it. Well, we do have some fall weather, even though we talked about very spring-like weather. By the way, that's where all those tornadoes occurred on the map I showed you earlier in June. But their weather is non-tornado weather. It's the dew point's only 34 up in Bismarck. The temperature is only 57 degrees. Very cool. In fact, we show a lot of 50s and 60s all over this map. By the way, you're looking at station models, and this is the real shorthand version of what already is a shorthand to indicate weather. But you basically are always looking at a upper left temperature, lower left dew point. The wind always flows along that line, and then these indicate wind speed. A full one like that is 10 knots. So very dry air, very calm air. The wind's not terribly strong up in any part. Remember that high pressure cell was right here on the map I just showed you. So that accounts for these really calm winds you're seeing here through parts of South Dakota and Nebraska. Now, the low temperature forecast for tomorrow morning will be below freezing and also pretty frosty up through North Dakota, parts of Minnesota, and of course the automatically higher elevations of Wyoming and Montana will get that treatment. Moving ahead 24 hours to Wednesday morning, the chilly air shifts to Michigan, northern Wisconsin, the Arrowhead region, and parts of northwest Minnesota with lows again below freezing. Not surprisingly, they have a freeze warning in effect for this area. That kind of overlaps the freeze watch that is in effect for this area. And that's just 2 different days. I already showed you. So we have tomorrow morning's lows, and then we have Wednesday morning's lows. And then we also have that little threat in Wyoming. Now, is this the trend? Not really. I show you this just to kind of contrast it to what's expected temperature-wise. Even though on Tuesday, highs will be only in the 60s through parts of Nebraska and as far south as the panhandle of Texas, it'll be up to 80 in New England, which is very warm for them, about 15 degrees above the normal highs for this time of year. And yeah, a little bit cool for high temperatures where I showed you those frost advisories. But as we go ahead to Thursday, the cool air shifts to the east, but much of this central northern plains, even parts of the northwest, warming up again. To remind you, the colors on this map are not actual temperatures, they're departures from what is expected this time of year. So even though Goodland, for instance, 84 degrees, that's very warm for early October for them. Chicago's not too bad, 64. They had a real hot run of weather there for a while. And then moving ahead to Saturday, the heat just really doubles down across the northern plains with readings well into the 80s in South Dakota. And again, much of the central and even parts of the eastern U.S. experiencing above normal temperatures through Saturday. Now, let's pick this up on the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook. So this starts the day after that, Sunday, and goes through Thursday. And we still see a core of warm temperatures. The darker the color, the more confident that the climate folks are in this forecast. So it's going to be, again, enjoy it in Chicago with highs in the 60s because it's going back to much above normal temperatures, even as you saw toward the weekend and especially next week. Heavy rain is not an issue across much of the country. Certainly, Florida, South Florida, is still getting a flow of easterly winds, which promotes just high moisture content in that part of the state. And also, you see this new patch here, or at least new from last week, of really pretty wet weather in Kentucky. The yellow is 4 inches. Now, this is over a 5-day spread, so there are no watches in effect for any of this currently. There might be later in the week, but the red indicates 2 to 3 inch totals and 3 almost 4 inch totals. So pretty good through parts of Kentucky, an area that could use some rain. And if you look at the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook for the country starting this Sunday, you do see a fairly high confidence of wet weather in southern Arizona as the remnants of a tropical system worked its way up there, and pretty dry in the southeast, and at least a shot at some rain across much of the northern and central plains, and maybe a sliver of the eastern U.S. Finally, we'll look at the tropics here. This is the Atlantic. There's a little disturbance that could form there and move across the Yucatan into the Bay of Campeche. This is over the next 7 days. Not a very high chance, 30% chance or less watching that. I have a feeling that if that were to form, it would probably go that way, but there's always a chance some of these storms could loop more northward toward Texas, let's say, or even into the Gulf. I'll show you why that's significant in a minute. Meanwhile, a fairly high chance of this next tropical system developing over the next 7 days, 70% chance or greater. But like almost every single storm that's formed in the main development region, it is taking a track almost immediately to the northwest and then curving toward the end of its life. So, does that mean it won't impact the U.S.? No, it's still quite a ways out, but all indications are that it's probably something, yes, that needs to be watched, but probably won't. These are sea surface temperature anomalies, not the actual temperatures, but how they compare to normal. And I just want to show you, just generally speaking, the Gulf is warm, as so is the Caribbean. And you can see where past hurricanes have welled up the water and cooled it down, like that area right there. So I just wanted to show you that this is a really good energy zone still. So something that forms out here and can manage to take a track this way, at least we'll have fuel to keep on going. Here's the hurricane season so far, 2025. That's where the actual tracks are. If you see a purple line, that is a major hurricane, and I summed it all up right here. Here's the forecast for the season, and here's where we stand. The Hurricane Center was calling for 13 to 18 named storms. There are 9 presently. Hurricanes not quite in range yet, but it's interesting to note that of the 4 that occurred, all reached major hurricane status. That's from the middle of the scale upward. We don't really expect a whole lot in the month of October, it diminishes significantly, but you'll notice, again, there's a leg of development down here where they had that highlighted area. Remember that? So, again, if the winds turn around and that doesn't cross this way and it manages to hang out here in the warm waters, it could be something, but again, we got 7 days to watch that. And just so you know where we are on the graph here, so this is the normal activity line for hurricanes and tropical storms. It reached its peak around September 10th, and we're sitting here now in the early part of October, so the white line indicates where we are, diminishing quickly, but still, these next couple of weeks still could be pretty active over the Atlantic. Thanks for watching this edition of Weather to Watch. It comes out every other day, or as the weather necessitates. Please remember to share this with your friends, subscribe to the channel, or at the very least, like what you just watched. Thanks.